Welcome back. Before we could actually write our data to a local disk, we need to find out which technology we want to use for it. There are multiple different ways that you could write something to a local disk. One of them is converting your data, such as, let's say, a grocery list class, into an array and dictionaries and writing it as a text string and reading it back. The other one is using core data, which is a framework from Apple. And another one is using the property list, such here info.propertylist. Property lists are actually really cool because they allow you to store information such as strings, booleans, arrays, or dictionaries. And they're really handy to read and write information. The only downside with property lists is you have to make sure your classes, or at least the ones you want to write, they conform to XCoding protocol. Now let's quickly talk about that. Let's say I want to go to my user class, and what I want to do is I want to be able to write this to my local disk. There is essentially no way that you can write a class, a custom class to your local disk, simply because there is no predefined method for that. So what you want to do is you can do either convert this into a dictionary manually, or use NSCoding to let NSCoding to convert it for you. That's what we're going to do in this example. So what you want to do is you want to go ahead to your class declaration. You want to say NSCoding. So that's the protocol I also want to use. And the moment you use that, it's going to give you a little error saying, well, you want to use it, but you are not using all of its necessary methods. So I'm going to add those. So it adds two functions essentially. One of them is encode, the other one is essentially decode. So let me cut these two, put it at the bottom of my code. That makes more sense for me to have them in here. It doesn't really matter where they are located, but it just makes more sense to me. So the first thing you want to do is when we want to encode our information, that means take this information, convert it into something that can be written, such as a dictionary. So that's actually quite easy. I'm going to say encoder dot encode. What do we want to encode? We want to encode self.name for the key name. Very similar to when you define dictionaries. So you say encode this guy for that name. Then encoder dot encode. Similar thing, self.email for the key email, of course. And finally, encoder.encode self.uid for the key UID. That's about it. So every time you want to encode, it's going to take these values and it's going to encode them based on these keys, which is exactly, what we want. Now, let's worry about decoding it. So for decoding it, I want to say this decoder has the information that I want. Let's find them out. So first of all, let name be a decoder dot decode object for key, and the key is obviously called name. Then you could actually say necessarily make this one as a string so that you know it is going to be exactly the type that you want. So it is necessarily a string. I think I made a little mistake here. I said decode boolean, well, I meant decode object. Yes, so decode object for key name. Then let's do another one. Let email be a decoder dot decode object for key. Again, I made the same mistake. I don't know why that's happening. Decode object for key, exactly. Email as a string. And finally, let UID be a decoder dot decode object for key, and the key is UID. Make sure your spellings are absolutely identical, because if you make a little mistake, it won't work, as a string. And now that we have these, now that we have a name, an email, and a UID, we could simply go ahead and say, well, self.init with these information with name, with email, and with UID. So that init, that override that we have written, we can easily use it in here to initialize our object of the type user class. That's about that. So it all should work by now. I've got a little bit of a warning in here, which means self init. Yes, we had that. It wants us to insert a convenience, of course, because the actual init is this one. So this is a very similar practice that we have to do for all of our custom classes. I won't spend time in doing it for every class, a grocery list class as well as the item class. I'm just going to give you the code for them. But if you want to do them yourself, just look at this and do the exact same thing. A coder takes your values and encodes them using keys. A decoder knows your values and you can read them based on those keys, exactly like how a dictionary works. And once you have your information, you initialize a new copy of your class type. That's all we have to do for now. Let's move on to our next lesson.